The sky above Montana was painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air carried a crispness that signaled the approach of autumn, and the forest was alive with sounds, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the occasional howl of wolves echoing through the trees. Nick Carter stood at the edge of his cabin's porch, binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the horizon. He wasn't looking for anything specific. It was just part of his routine. As a wildlife biologist, he had spent years studying the behavior of predators in the wild. Today, however, something felt different. Far away, beyond the mountains, a faint glow appeared in the sky. At first, Nick thought it might be an airplane or perhaps a satellite catching the last rays of sunlight. But as he adjusted the focus, on his binoculars the glow grew brighter, larger, and more ominous. It wasn't moving like an aircraft would. Instead, it hovered steadily, casting an eerie light over the landscape. Nick lowered the binoculars and squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Whatever it was, it didn't belong here. Back, in New York City, Lisa Bennett sat hunched over her laptop in a dimly lit apartment. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she sifted through streams of data, searching for answers. As a journalist, Lisa had made a name for herself uncovering secrets others preferred to keep hidden. Lately, though, her work had taken a darker turn. Strange reports had been flooding in from around the world. Satellite malfunctions, unexplained, power outages, and bizarre atmospheric phenomena. Most dismissed them as glitches or natural occurrences, but Lisa knew better. Something big was happening, and she intended to find out what. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her, breaking her concentration. Without taking her eyes off the screen, she reached for it and glanced at the notification. It was another alert. One of the geostationary satellites had gone offline. That made 3 in the past week. She frowned, tapping the screen to dismiss the message. Just as she did, her computer emitted a soft ping, signaling a new email. Curious, she opened it. The subject line read, "Classified documents, eyes only." Her heart raced as she clicked the attachment. What she saw next sent chills down her spine. Meanwhile, back in Montana, Nick couldn't shake the feeling that the glowing object in the sky meant trouble. He grabbed his rifle from inside the cabin and slung it over his shoulder before heading out into the woods. His plan was simple: get closer to the source of the light and figure out what it was. If nothing else, he could document its effects on the local wildlife. Over the years, he'd learned that animals often reacted to changes in their environment long before humans noticed anything amiss. Sure enough, as he ventured deeper into the forest, he began to notice subtle signs of distress among the creatures around him. A pack of wolves darted nervously through the underbrush, their movements erratic and agitated. Normally, they would have been calm this time of evening, settling down after a day of hunting. Not tonight. Even the birds seemed restless, chirping loudly and flitting between branches without any clear purpose. Nick paused, crouching low to observe a lone cougar perched on a rock ledge. Its ears twitched constantly and its tail flicked back and forth, a sure sign of unease. Whatever was causing this reaction, it was spreading quickly. As he moved further into the wilderness, the glow in the sky grew brighter, illuminating the trees in an unnatural light. Nick stopped suddenly when he heard a low rumble in the distance. It wasn't thunder, it was something mechanical, deep and resonant. He followed the sound cautiously, his senses on high alert. When he finally reached the source, his breath caught in his throat. Hovering just above the treetops was a massive structure, smooth, metallic, and unlike anything he'd ever seen. It pulsed with energy, emitting a faint hum that vibrated through the ground beneath his feet. Nick ducked behind a tree, gripping his rifle tightly. He wasn't afraid, not exactly, but he knew enough to be cautious. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't human-made. Before he could decide what to do next, a loud crash echoed through the forest. Turning toward the noise, he saw a strange, insect-like drone emerge from the shadows. It hovered silently for a moment before descending toward a group of deer grazing nearby. The animals froze, paralyzed by fear, as the drone extended sharp appendages and began harvesting them with terrifying efficiency. Nick's stomach churned as he watched the scene unfold. He wanted to intervene, to stop the slaughter, but he knew it was futile. There was no way he could take on a machine like that alone. Then, out of nowhere, a grizzly bear charged into view. With a deafening roar, it swiped at the drone, tearing through its metal frame with ease. The machine sparked and sputtered before collapsing in a heap of twisted parts. The bear stood over the wreckage, panting heavily, before turning its attention to the fallen deer. It sniffed at the bodies briefly, before lumbering off into the woods. Nick stared after the bear, his mind racing. Why had it attacked the drone? Was it defending the deer? Or was there something else driving its actions? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Earth's carnivores were responding to the alien presence in ways humans couldn't yet understand. And if Nick had learned anything during his years in the field, it was that instincts rarely lied. Hundreds of miles away, Lisa leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she processed the information in front of her. The classified documents revealed details of a top-secret government program called Project Apex. According to the files, scientists had been experimenting with carnivorous animals for decades, attempting to harness their unique abilities for military purposes. One section mentioned neural pathways found only in apex predators, pathways that allowed them to detect and resist certain forms of external influence. The project had been abandoned due to lack of funding, but the implications were staggering. Lisa's thoughts drifted to Nick Carter, whose name she'd come across while digging through the documents. He was listed as a consultant on several studies related to predator behavior, including some tied to Project Apex. Could he hold the key to understanding what was happening now? Determined to find out, she picked up her phone and dialed his number. In Montana, Nick's phone rang just as he was making his way back to the cabin. Startled, he fumbled with it before answering. "Hello?" he said, his voice hoarse from the cold night air. "Mr. Carter? This is Lisa Bennett. I'm a journalist based in New York." Her tone was urgent, almost frantic. "I need your help." Nick frowned, unsure whether to trust her. "What kind of help?" "There's something you need to see," she replied. "Something big. Can we meet?" Nick hesitated, glancing back toward the glowing object in the distance. Something told him this wasn't a coincidence. "All right," he said finally. "Where?" They agreed to meet in Chicago, where remnants of Project Apex were rumored to be stored. As Nick hung up the phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. Little did he know. The events unfolding in the skies above and the instincts of Earth's carnivores would soon thrust him into the fight of his life. The morning sun filtered through the trees as Nick Carter packed his gear. His mind was a whirlwind of questions after the call with Lisa Bennett. Who was she, really? And why did she sound so desperate? He trusted his instincts more than anything else, and they told him this wasn't just some random journalist chasing a story. There was something bigger at play, something tied to the glowing object in the sky and the strange behavior of the animals he'd witnessed last night. As he loaded his truck, Nick glanced toward the horizon. The glow had faded by now, but the memory of it lingered like a shadow in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of that alien drone or the grizzly bear tearing it apart. It wasn't just an act of defense. It was almost as if the bear knew what the machine was doing, knew it was dangerous. That thought alone sent a chill down his spine. The drive to Chicago would take hours, but Nick didn't mind. The open road gave him time to think. He replayed the conversation with Lisa over and over again. What did she mean when she said there was something big he needed to see? Something about predators, something about Project Apex. Whatever it was, it had her spooked, and if there was one thing Nick respected, it was someone who took their work seriously enough to get scared. In New York City, Lisa Bennett was already preparing for the trip. She hadn't slept much after sending those classified documents to her secure server. Her apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in as she stared at the screen displaying page after page of government secrets. The words blurred together, but one phrase stood out. Carnivorous species exhibit heightened resistance to extraterrestrial influence. It sounded absurd, like something out of a science fiction novel, but the evidence was undeniable. Decades of research pointed to the same conclusion. Earth's apex predators possessed unique traits that made them capable of detecting and resisting alien technology. Traits that humanity had ignored or dismissed as irrelevant until now. Lisa grabbed her laptop and shoved it into her bag along with a few changes of clothes. She didn't have time to pack carefully. Every second counted. Outside, the city buzzed, with its usual chaos oblivious to the danger looming above. People rushed to work, cars honked, and street vendors shouted their wares. To them, it was just another day. To Lisa, it felt like the calm before a storm. She hailed a cab and headed to the train station, her mind racing. If Nick could help her piece together what was happening, if he could connect the dots between the animal behavior he'd observed and the information in the documents, they might stand a chance. A slim one maybe, but still a chance. By the time Nick reached Chicago, the city skyline loomed ahead, jagged and imposing against the gray afternoon sky. Traffic crawled along the expressway, and Nick drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, impatient to arrive. He pulled into a parking garage near the agreed meeting point, a quiet cafe tucked away in a corner of downtown. The place was cozy, with warm lighting and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Lisa spotted him immediately. She recognized the rugged look from his photos online. Scruffy beard, worn flannel shirt, and boots caked with dirt. He looked like someone who spent most of his time outdoors, which suited her just fine. She waved him over, clutching her bag tightly as he approached. "Nick?" she asked, standing up. "That's me," he replied, offering a firm handshake. "You're Lisa?" She nodded. "Thanks for coming. I know this is sudden." "No kidding," Nick said, sliding into the booth across from her. "You mentioned something about predators. Care to explain?" Lisa hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Then she opened her laptop and turned it toward him. "I'll show you instead." Nick leaned forward, scanning the documents displayed on the screen. At first, his expression remained neutral, but as he read further, his brow furrowed. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. "It's called Project Apex," Lisa explained. "The government has been studying carnivores for years, trying to figure out why they react differently to certain stimuli compared to other animals. Specifically, extraterrestrial stimuli." Nick raised an eyebrow. "Extraterrestrial? You're telling me aliens are involved?" "I know it sounds crazy," Lisa admitted, "but think about what you saw last night. That drone, the bear attacking it. Doesn't that seem unusual?" Nick didn't answer right away. Instead, he thought back to the events in the forest, the way the animals had acted, not just the bear, but the wolves, the cougar, even the birds. It all fit. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's say I believe you. What does this have to do with me?" Lisa leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Your research is mentioned in these files. You've worked with apex predators for years, studying their instincts, their behavior. That makes you uniquely qualified to help us understand what's going on, because whatever those things are," she gestured vaguely toward the sky, "they're not here to negotiate." Nick frowned, leaning back in his seat. "Us? Who's us?" "There's a team," Lisa said. "Or at least there will. Be scientists, military personnel, maybe others like you. We need to figure out how to use Earth's carnivores to fight back. They're our best shot." Nick let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. This was a lot to process. Aliens, government experiments, carnivores as weapons. It all sounded like the plot of a bad movie. But deep down, he knew Lisa was right. Something was wrong with the world, and the animals were reacting to it in ways humans couldn't yet comprehend. "All right," he said after a moment. "Where do we start?" Lisa smiled faintly, relieved that he hadn't walked away. "There's a facility outside the city where they kept records from Project Apex. Some of the equipment might still be there. If we can find it, we might be able to replicate their findings." "And if we can't?" Nick asked. "Then we're on our own," Lisa replied simply. The facility turned out to be an old warehouse nestled in the industrial part of town. Its windows were boarded up and weeds sprouted through cracks in the pavement. Nick parked his truck a block away and they approached cautiously, keeping an eye out for security cameras or guards. The place looked abandoned, but appearances could be deceiving. Inside, the air smelled damp and musty. Dust covered everything, and the dim light filtering through gaps in the boards cast eerie shadows on the walls. Lisa led the way, consulting a map she'd printed from the documents. "This way," she whispered, pointing down a narrow hallway. They moved quietly, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of grime on the floor. After a few minutes, they found what they were looking for, a locked door labeled restricted access. Nick pulled a crowbar from his backpack and pried it open with ease. Beyond the door was a room filled with dusty filing cabinets, outdated computers, and shelves stacked with lab equipment. "This is it," Lisa murmured, her eyes wide with excitement. "We need to grab whatever we can." They worked quickly, sorting through folders and loading anything useful into duffel bags. Nick noticed a row of monitors in the corner and powered one up. To his surprise, it flickered to life, displaying grainy footage of various animals undergoing tests. In one clip, a lion was placed in a chamber with a small, drone-like device. The lion growled, pacing back and forth before lunging at the machine and destroying it in seconds. They were testing them, Nick said, watching the screen intently, seeing how they reacted to alien tech. "And it worked," Lisa added. "Look at this." She held up a folder containing detailed notes on the experiments. According to these reports, the animals weren't just reacting instinctively. Their brains were actively resisting the drone's influence. Nick shook his head in disbelief. "So what you're saying is, the aliens are targeting herbivores, and the carnivores are fighting back?" "Exactly," Lisa said. "And we need to figure out why." As they left the warehouse, the weight of what they'd discovered settled heavily on both of them. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was terrifying. Humanity was facing an enemy unlike any it had encountered before, and its only hope lay in creatures it had long overlooked. Back in the truck, Nick glanced at Lisa. "You realize this is insane, right?" She nodded. "Yeah, but sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that save us." He chuckled darkly, turning the key in the ignition. "Guess we'll find out soon enough." The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Earth's carnivores were ready to fight. Whether humanity could keep up remained to be seen. The drive back to Montana was long and quiet, but neither Nick nor Lisa minded. Both were lost in thought, replaying the events of the past few hours. The dusty files and old equipment they'd salvaged from the warehouse were now stowed safely in the back of Nick's truck. They didn't know yet how useful any of it would be, but it was a start. For now, their priority was simple: get off the grid and regroup. Nick glanced at Lisa occasionally as he drove, noticing the way she tapped her fingers nervously on her knee. She seemed calm on the surface, but he could tell she was holding herself, together by sheer willpower. He admired that about her, her determination to push forward despite the chaos unfolding around them. Still, he couldn't help feeling uneasy. What exactly had they stumbled into? And more importantly, what came next? "We should stop soon," Lisa said finally, breaking the silence. "I need to go over those documents again." Nick nodded. "There's a place up ahead where we can pull over, not too far from my cabin." "Good," Lisa replied, pulling her laptop out of her bag. "I want to see if there's anything we missed." When they arrived at Nick's cabin later that evening, the air was crisp and cool. The forest surrounding the property was eerily quiet, as though even the wildlife knew something was wrong. Nick parked the truck near the porch and began unloading their gear, while Lisa set up her laptop inside. The cabin itself was modest, a single-story structure with wooden walls, a stone fireplace, and a small kitchen tucked into one corner. It wasn't much, but it would do for now. As Lisa worked through the documents, Nick stepped outside to check on the animals. Over the years, he'd grown accustomed to observing their behavior, and tonight, he needed answers. He grabbed a flashlight and made his way into the woods, moving slowly so as not to startle anything. The moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light over the landscape. At first glance, everything seemed normal. A family of raccoons scurried across his path, disappearing into the underbrush. An owl hooted softly in the distance, but as Nick ventured deeper, he noticed subtle changes. The wolves that usually roamed this area were nowhere to be seen. Instead, he found tracks, fresh ones, leading away from the forest and toward the mountains. Their movements were erratic, almost panicked. Then he heard it, a low growl, barely audible over the rustling leaves. Turning toward the sound, Nick spotted a cougar crouched low in the shadows, its eyes gleaming like embers. Normally, such an encounter would have sent him retreating carefully, but tonight, the animal didn't seem interested in attacking. Its gaze was fixed on something beyond the trees, its body tense and alert. Nick followed the cougar's line of sight and froze. Hovering silently above the treetops was another alien drone. This one was smaller than the one he'd seen before, but its presence was no less menacing. It moved slowly, scanning the ground below with a faint red beam. The cougar let out a sharp hiss, its fur bristling as it prepared to strike. Without thinking, Nick raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed through the forest, startling the drone and causing it to veer off course. The cougar took advantage of the distraction, leaping onto a nearby rock and swiping at the machine with razor-sharp claws. Sparks flew as metal crumpled under the force of the attack, and within moments the drone plummeted to the ground, lifeless. Nick lowered his rifle, breathing heavily. He approached the cougar cautiously, half expecting it to turn on him. But, instead, the animal simply stared at him for a moment before bounding off into the darkness. Whatever instinct had driven it to fight the drone, it clearly understood that Nick wasn't a threat. Back at the cabin, Lisa looked up from her laptop as Nick returned. His face was grim and his hands were trembling slightly. "Another one?" she asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded, setting the rifle down on the table. "Yeah, and this time I got a closer look. These things, they're hunting. Systematically taking out herbivores, deer, elk, livestock, it doesn't matter. If it eats plants, they're targeting it." Lisa frowned, processing the information. "That fits with what I've been reading. Herbivores are easier to control. Maybe that's why the aliens are focusing on them." "But why?" Nick asked. "What's the point of wiping out all the herbivores?" "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But it can't be good. If they succeed, entire ecosystems will collapse. No herbivores means no food for predators. Eventually, even carnivores won't survive." Nick sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "So we're looking at mass extinction unless we stop them." "Pretty much," Lisa said quietly. "Which is why we need to figure out how to use the carnivores to our advantage. They're the only ones fighting back right now." Over the next few days, Nick and Lisa pored over the documents and equipment they'd recovered. Slowly, they began piecing together the puzzle. The experiments conducted during Project Apex had focused on identifying specific neural pathways in carnivorous species, pathways that allowed them to detect and resist external influences. While humans lacked these traits, predators like wolves, lions, and bears possessed them naturally. What if we could amplify those abilities? Lisa suggested one evening, staring at a diagram on her laptop. If we could enhance their resistance, maybe we could turn them into effective weapons against the drones. "It's risky," Nick said. "We don't know what kind of side effects that might have. Messing with their brains could make them unpredictable." "I know," Lisa replied, "but we don't have a choice. Time's running out." Reluctantly, Nick agreed. Together, they devised a plan to test their theory. Using modified pheromones and audio signals, they hoped to attract local predators to the cabin. Once there, they could monitor their reactions to simulated alien threats and determine whether the animal's instincts could be harnessed effectively. The first step was setting traps, not to capture the animals, but to lure them close. Nick used food scraps and scents to draw in wolves and cougars, while Lisa rigged up speakers to emit low-frequency sounds, similar to those emitted by the drones. By morning, their efforts paid off. A pack of wolves appeared at the edge of the clearing, their ears pricked and tails stiff with suspicion. Behind them, a solitary cougar emerged from the trees, its golden eyes glinting in the sunlight. Lisa watched in awe as the animal sniffed the air, seemingly aware of the simulated threat. When the speakers activated, emitting a faint hum, the meow, wolves growled in unison, their hackles rising. The cougar crouched low, ready to pounce. It was as though they recognized the sound even though none of them had encountered a real drone before. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered, scribbling notes furiously. "They're responding exactly as predicted." Nick nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still don't know if they'll react the same way to actual drones. Then we'll find out," Lisa said firmly. "Tomorrow, we take this to the next level." The following day, they drove to a nearby valley where reports of drone activity had been increasing. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, they set up camp and waited. It wasn't long before their patience paid off. A swarm of drones descended from the sky, targeting a herd of deer grazing nearby. The animals scattered in terror, but the drones pursued relentlessly, harvesting them with mechanical precision. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, a chorus of howls split the air. From the trees emerged a pack of wolves, led by a massive, alpha male. They charged at the drones without hesitation, snapping and biting at the machines until they fell apart. Moments later, a grizzly bear lumbered into view, swatting at the remaining drones with devastating force. Nick and Lisa watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. Against all odds, the predators were winning. When the last drone crashed to the ground, the animals turned and disappeared back into the forest, leaving behind a scene of destruction. "Well," Lisa said finally, breaking the silence. "I think we just answered our question." Nick nodded, a mixture of awe and dread washing over him. "Yeah, but now comes the hard part. How do we get the rest of the world to listen?" Lisa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. Earth's carnivores weren't going down without a fight. And neither were they. The morning after the battle in the valley, Nick and Lisa sat by the fire outside their makeshift camp. The events of the previous day still weighed heavily on them, but there was no time to rest. They had witnessed something extraordinary. Earth's carnivores fighting back against an alien threat, and now they needed to figure out how to share that knowledge with the world. Lisa stared into the flames, her mind racing. "We need proof," she said finally. "Something undeniable. Videos, photos, anything that shows what happened here." Nick nodded, sipping from a tin cup of coffee. "I've got footage on my camera, but it's not just about showing people what we saw. We need to explain why it matters, why these animals are our best shot at survival." "Exactly," Lisa agreed. "But where do we even start? Governments won't listen to two random people claiming aliens are attacking Earth, not without solid evidence." Nick leaned back, thinking. "What if we go bigger? Spread the word ourselves. Use social media, news outlets, anything to get the message out." Lisa hesitated. "It's risky. If we're wrong, we'll look like lunatics. And if we're right, well, governments might try to shut us down before we can make a difference." Nick smirked. "Sounds like we don't have much of a choice." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to compile their findings. Nick reviewed the footage he'd captured during the battle, editing it into a short video that highlighted the wolves' and bears' coordinated attacks on the drones. Lisa wrote a detailed report explaining their observations, including references to Project Apex and the unique neural pathways found in carnivorous species. Together, they created a presentation designed to grab attention and spark action. Once everything was ready, Lisa uploaded the video to several online platforms, tagging journalists, scientists, and environmental organizations. She also sent copies of the report to trusted contacts within the scientific community, hoping someone would take notice. Meanwhile, Nick reached out to fellow wildlife biologists and conservationists, urging them to observe local animal behavior and report any unusual activity. At first, the response was slow. A few users commented on the video, calling it fake or dismissing it as a hoax. But then, something unexpected happened. Reports began pouring in from across the country, and eventually, around the world. People shared stories of predators attacking alien drones, lions in Africa tearing apart machines, packs of stray dogs in cities swarming over fallen drones, even domestic cats leaping onto windowsills to claw at hovering devices. One particularly striking story came from Alaska, where a man named Jason Cole described watching polar bears destroy a group of drones near his remote cabin. According to him, the bears had acted with precision, almost as if they were working together. Intrigued, Lisa tracked down Jason's contact information and gave him a call. "You're telling me this is happening everywhere?" Jason asked when Lisa explained their theory. "That's right," Lisa replied. "And we think the animals are responding instinctively to the threat. What you've seen matches what we've observed here." Jason paused for a moment. "If you're right, humanity owes them a lot more than we realize." "We're trying to spread the word," Lisa said, "but we could use your help. Have you noticed anything else unusual?" "As a matter of fact, I have," Jason replied. "There's a network of hunters and trackers up here who've been keeping tabs on the situation. Some of them are already organizing groups to assist the animals. If you want, I can connect you." Lisa smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope. "That would be amazing. Thank you." As word spread, the movement gained momentum. In Yellowstone National Park, Maria Okoro, a conservationist specializing in African wildlife, received a copy of Nick and Lisa's report. She immediately recognized its significance and began rallying support among her colleagues. Using her connections, she arranged for teams of rangers and researchers to monitor predator behavior and document interactions with the alien drones. Across the Atlantic, Alexei Volkov, a Russian zoologist known for his work with Siberian tigers, joined the effort. His studies had long focused on the adaptability of big cats, and he quickly realized their potential role in combating the invasion. With permission from local authorities, Alexei began training tigers to respond to simulated drone sounds, teaching them to associate the noise with danger. Even urban areas saw changes. In cities like New York and Los Angeles, civilians banded together to protect their neighborhoods. Stray dogs and feral cats became unlikely heroes, attacking drones that ventured too close to residential areas. Social media lit up with videos of these brave animals, earning them nicknames like guardians of the streets and urban warriors. Back in Montana, Nick and Lisa monitored the growing resistance from their cabin. Every day brought new reports, each one reinforcing their belief that Earth's carnivores were humanity's greatest allies. But they also knew the scale of the threat was far greater than anyone had anticipated. The swarmlords weren't just targeting isolated regions, they were systematically dismantling entire ecosystems. "We're running out of time," Lisa said one evening, scrolling through updates on her laptop. "They're moving faster than we can keep up with." Nick nodded, staring at the map pinned to the wall. Red dots marked locations where drone activity had been reported, and the pattern was clear. The invaders were spreading outward, consuming everything in their path. "We need to hit them where it hurts," he said. "Find their weak spot and strike." "But how?" Lisa asked. "We don't even know where they're coming from." Nick tapped the map thoughtfully. "Maybe we don't need to, if we can unite all these efforts. If we can coordinate attacks on a global scale, we might stand a chance." Their plan was ambitious, but it wasn't impossible. Over the next week, Nick and Lisa worked to establish communication channels between key players in the resistance. Using encrypted messaging apps and secure servers, they connected wildlife experts, military veterans, and civilian volunteers from around the world. Each group contributed their skills and resources, forming a decentralized network capable of responding to threats wherever they emerged. Jason Cole proved invaluable, organizing supply drops and coordinating strategies. With hunters in Alaska, Maria Okoro mobilized her teams in Africa, deploying lions and hyenas to defend endangered herbivore populations. Alexei Volkov trained his tigers to patrol vast stretches of Siberian wilderness, ensuring no drone slipped past unnoticed. In urban centers, grassroots movements sprang up overnight. Volunteers set traps using modified pheromones and audio signals to lure stray animals toward drone hotspots. Others built makeshift shelters to house injured predators, providing medical care and food until they recovered. Even children got involved, feeding neighborhood strays and cheering them on as they chased off alien machines. Despite the chaos, a sense of unity began to emerge. For the first time in years, humanity found common ground, not in politics or religion, but in the shared goal of survival. And at the heart of it all were the animals, driven by instincts older than civilization itself. By the end of the month, the resistance had grown into a global force. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting images of wolves, lions, and bears taking down drones in dramatic fashion. Scientists debated the implications of Nick and Lisa's findings, while governments scrambled to catch up. Some dismissed the phenomenon as coincidence, but others saw it for what it truly was, a turning point in the fight for Earth's future. Nick stood on the porch of his cabin one night, watching the stars twinkle above the trees. The glow of the alien mothership was faint but visible, a constant reminder of the danger looming overhead. Beside him, Lisa leaned against the railing, her arms crossed tightly. "What happens next?" she asked softly. Nick sighed, shaking his head. "I don't know, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." Lisa smiled faintly, looking out at the forest. Somewhere out there, Earth's carnivores were waiting for the next battle, the next challenge. And so were they. The days blurred together as Nick and Lisa worked tirelessly to strengthen the global resistance. Their cabin in Montana had become a makeshift command center, filled with maps, laptops, and stacks of notes. The walls were covered in red strings, connecting locations where drone activity had been reported, forming a sprawling web of data. Despite the chaos outside, there was a strange sense of purpose inside the cabin. Every decision they made felt like another step toward survival. But even as the resistance grew stronger, so did the Swarm Lord's aggression. Reports flooded in daily, detailing new attacks on herbivore populations. Entire herds of bison in Yellowstone were wiped out overnight. Deer vanished from forests across North America. In Africa, elephants and giraffes fell victim to relentless waves of drones. The devastation was overwhelming, and it left humanity teetering on the edge of despair. Nick stared at the map on the wall, his jaw clenched. "They're accelerating," he muttered. "If we don't stop them soon, there won't be anything left." Lisa nodded, her eyes dark with worry. "We need to test our theory on a larger scale, see if we can coordinate an attack. Not just defend, but strike back." Nick turned to face her. "You mean go after their ships?" "Not yet," Lisa replied. "But we can target their ground forces. If we organize enough predators and people to hit them all at once, we might buy ourselves some time." Nick hesitated, considering the risks. "It's dangerous. We'd be putting everyone involved in harm's way." "We don't have a choice," Lisa said firmly. "If we sit back and wait, they'll win. And then none of this will matter." Their first coordinated assault took place in Wyoming, near a stretch of prairie where drone activity had been particularly intense. Nick and Lisa joined forces with Maria Okoro, who had brought along a team of rangers and a pack of African wild dogs trained to respond to simulated threats. Together, they set up camp on the outskirts of the area, laying traps and preparing for battle. As night fell, the air grew tense. The group gathered around a small fire, discussing strategy. Maria explained how the wild dogs would act as scouts, using their speed and agility to locate the drones. Once they identified a swarm, the humans would signal nearby predators, wolves, cougars, and even bears, to converge on the location and destroy the machines. "It's risky," Maria warned. "These animals are unpredictable. Even if they understand the threat, they might not cooperate." "They will," Nick said confidently. "They've done it before. All we have to do is give them the chance." At dawn, the operation began. Maria released the wild dogs, watching as they darted across the prairie, noses twitching as they searched for signs of the enemy. Within minutes, they returned, barking urgently to signal the presence of drones. Following their lead, the humans moved into position, using flares and loudspeakers to attract nearby predators. The first wave of drones appeared suddenly, hovering silently above the grasslands. Without hesitation, the wolves surged forward, snapping at the machines with sharp teeth. Cougars leaped onto rocks and trees, ambushing the drones from above. Bears charged through the fray, swatting at the alien devices with massive paws. It was chaos, but it was working. From a safe distance, Nick and Lisa watched in awe as the animals tore through the swarm. Each predator seemed to instinctively know its role, moving with precision and purpose. When one drone fell, another took its place. But the tide was turning. Slowly, the invaders began retreating, disappearing into the sky as quickly as they had arrived. When the dust settled, the group gathered to assess the damage. Dozens of drones lay scattered across the field, their metallic remains glinting in the sunlight. There were casualties among the animals. A few wolves limped away with injuries, and one cougar had been fatally wounded. But overall, the operation had been a success. Maria knelt beside the injured animals, tending to their wounds with supplies from her kit. "This changes everything," she said, looking up at Nick and Lisa. "If we can replicate this on a larger scale, we might actually stand a chance." Word of the victory spread quickly, inspiring others to take action. In Alaska, Jason Cole led a team of hunters and trackers into the wilderness, armed with modified weapons designed to disable drones without harming the animals. They worked alongside polar bears and wolverines, creating a formidable alliance that pushed the invaders back further each day. In Siberia, Alexei Volkov deployed his trained tigers to patrol remote areas where drones often appeared. The big cats proved especially effective, using stealth and brute strength to ambush the machines before they could cause significant damage. Videos of the tigers in action went viral online, earning them international acclaim as symbols of hope. Even in cities, civilians found ways to contribute. Stray dogs and feral cats became unlikely heroes, attacking drones that ventured too close to residential neighborhoods. Volunteers built shelters and feeding stations to care for the animals, ensuring they remained healthy and strong enough to fight. Despite these victories, the swarm lords showed no signs of slowing down. As the resistance gained momentum, the aliens responded with increased force, deploying larger and more advanced drones capable of withstanding initial attacks. Casualties among both humans and animals began to rise, testing the resolve of everyone involved. Back in Montana, Nick and Lisa received troubling news. A group of mercenaries led by Victor Kane, a ruthless ex-military contractor, had attacked one of the resistance camps in Colorado. Using high-tech weapons and armored vehicles, they had slaughtered dozens of animals and captured several key members of the team. Their goal was clear. They wanted to exploit the situation for profit, selling information about the aliens to the highest bidder. "We can't let them get away with this," Lisa said angrily, pacing the cabin floor. "If Kane succeeds, he'll undo everything we've worked for." Nick nodded grimly. "Agreed. But taking him on directly is suicide. He's got better weapons and more men." "Then we outsmart him," Lisa said, stopping mid-step. "Use what we've learned about the animals. Let them do the fighting." The plan came together quickly. Using intel gathered from survivors of the Colorado attack, Nick and Lisa identified Kane's base of operations, a heavily fortified compound, located deep in the mountains. To infiltrate it, they enlisted the help of a pack of wolves known for their intelligence and coordination. Over the course of several days, they trained the animals to recognize specific sounds and scents associated with Kane's mercenaries. The night of the raid, the wolves approached the compound cautiously, staying hidden in the shadows until the signal was given. Inside the cabin, Nick and Lisa monitored the operation remotely, guiding the animals via radio transmitters attached to their collars. When the time came, they activated the speakers, emitting low-frequency sounds designed to draw the mercenaries' attention. The distraction worked perfectly. As Kane's men rushed outside to investigate, the wolves launched their attack, targeting weak points in the perimeter fence. Chaos erupted as the guards scrambled to defend themselves, giving Nick and Lisa's team the opening they needed to sneak inside. Once inside, they moved swiftly, freeing the captured resistance members and destroying vital equipment. By the time Kane realized what was happening, it was too late. His compound was overrun, and his forces were in disarray. With no other option, he ordered a retreat, leaving behind piles of useless gear and abandoned vehicles. The victory was bittersweet. While they had dealt a significant blow to Kane's operation, the cost had been high. Several wolves were killed during the raid, and many of the rescued resistance members were badly injured. Still, the mission proved that humanity and Earth's carnivores could work together to achieve incredible feats. As they regrouped at the cabin, Nick and Lisa reflected on what they had accomplished and what still lay ahead. The Swarm Lords remained a looming threat, their mothership hanging ominously in the sky. But for now they had bought themselves some time. Time to prepare. Time to fight back. And with Earth's carnivores standing beside them, they knew they weren't alone.